Hello everyone, my name is Viktor Zhechev, and in this video I'm going to present you with the work I've done in my bachelor thesis, namely client-side infrastructure for management of user input in MontiGem. My goal for this video is to present you with the basics of how MontiGem handles users' input and my work for advancing its concept of state management. The main effort of this work was introducing a persistent source of truth for the forms module in MontiGem. This means that all of the components of the application should be able to read and store their values in this object and not override it if not explicitly said so. For this to be achieved, we should touch on a software pattern called the Model View Controller, or MVC for short. It tells us about three main rules that our application should follow. First, we have the view, or what the user sees and interacts with. Then we must make sure that we have a so-called controller in place, which can take upon the user's input, validate its values, and also save them. And finally, we have the model. There, we store all of the application's data, including the user's input and some metadata about the application, etc. The function of the model is when a change in itself occurs to update the view and the other components. To achieve this flow of data in MontiGem, we used the help of another state management pattern called Redux and its implementation in Angular, the NgRx Store library. Redux introduces the concept of having one central object that holds the whole application state. This state can then get updated only through pure functions called reducers. Simply put, pure functions always give the same output if they are fed the same input. So the reducers get triggered by different actions in our code. The actions, on the other hand, can be called inside of services or components. And once the state is updated, it also notifies all of its subscribers that a change has occurred, so they can get the data from it. For the implementation and the testing of the NgRx Store, we have decided to take an internal test application from MontiGem, which is responsible for testing the forms module in MontiGem, and expand on it. This application represents a form built with all of the present input components in MontiGem, and we also further developed this application by adding another page with another form to it, and also a navigation between the two pages with the help of a header, so that we can switch back and forth between them. Now let us take a closer look on what the Redux construct is. We begin by looking at the actions. An action is simply a string of characters that holds a description of the action itself. The action triggers a reducer function, and it can also carry a payload of data that it can deliver to the reducer. Then in the reducer we have our initial state for the component. It can be empty or already pre-filled with some default values. Below that we have our pure functions for each action. If we receive an action, we take a copy from the old state, save our new input of the user from the user in the copy, and then override the old state with the new copy. By copying and overwriting the old state with its new modified copy, we assure immutability and that all of the subscribers receive the changes. In order for the NgRx Store to function, every form first subscribes to the store by specifying which part of the state it wants to receive updates for. Then it receives the model and it initializes the form with it. If this model is empty, MontiGem has internal tools and functions to determine what controls a form contains. If only some information is present in the model, MontiGem tries to determine if such entries are present in the form itself and fills out the inputs while it is initializing the form. It then creates a complete model of the form and updates the store with it. When a change in the input fields occur, an update action gets triggered and it updates the store with the changes. Now let me demonstrate how all of this works. Here on the left side, we see the expanded application with the both forms, the example form and the person form. I can navigate to each other through the header. On the right side, we see the developer tools for the NgRx Store. Here we can see when and which actions get triggered and the data that is currently stored in the store or the model. If I enter some information inside a field, you can see that the store gets updated and this string is saved. A key aspect of the implementation is that even if an input gets rejected by a field, it still gets stored inside of the model and it does not get lost. For example, if I input a random string in this field, in this date field, you can see that the field gets invalidated, but the value gets stored in the store altogether. Now, when I switched back and forth between the two pages, we can see that the form still gets initialized with what we have previously entered in the fields. With that, we have achieved our main goal of saving and managing the user input inside of a MontiGem application. Since Angular and MontiGem have differences in their forms object models, we noticed that some of the components were not behaving as intended. For example, the date input field has always deleted an invalid input on a page change. This is a clear violation of the MVC pattern and unwanted behavior because the controller tampers directly with the view. We want the user to have its data stored even if it's invalidated by the controller. The blame here falls not on MontiGem but on a dependency it uses, namely Angular material. When implementing a date using the Angular material library, we must use a predefined date picker element. This element always validated and the input before the control did. So if this input was rejected by the date picker, it was automatically erased from the input field and it never reached the control. To mitigate this, we had to build a component all over from the ground up with a couple of few other components that had the same problem. With that, we have finished the implementation of client-side infrastructure for management of user input in MontiGem, and I would like to thank you for your attention.